Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Micropython Team Score app. At this point I was going to do a line-by-line breakdown of the code and walk you through it. However, I've realised that that would be a 60-minute long and quite probably boring video that no one would watch. So instead I'm going to give you a quick overview of how I've structured the code and direct you to the GitHub repository that shows you how I've constructed this code and how you can then go and interpret that and possibly reconstruct it yourselves if you wanted to, if you looked at the GitHub commit history. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, I will show you. So this is the team score file here. So this is the program, and it is 278 lines long, which in the scheme of programming it is not very much. But in the scheme of the microbit, I think it's pretty much at its limit of what it's capable of storing, and in terms of what it's capable of handling in its memory. So at the top here, you can see I've imported the microbit library, which everyone needs to do for any project. I've also had to import the OS library, which is essentially a way it allows me to manipulate and edit and delete files, which we need for our persistent memory or our file system, that we retain the team scores. So I've set it up so variables are set at the top. So you could change these values to stage wait. Instead of waiting 3 seconds for something to happen and getting to the next stage in the code, we could set it to 5 seconds because these are milliseconds. We have the scores. This is a list or an array in other languages. So there are 5 teams, there are 5 scores, all set at 0 at the moment. There is this list here, or in Python they're known as tuples, which are basically lists or arrays that generally, or their values do not change. So here I've created teams XY, so these are the actual LEDs, or the first row of LEDs that show you which team is active at that point. So here 00 is the top left hand corner, and then you can see 40 for the 5th team is the top right hand corner, that first row on the right, that will be lit up. Okay, then we have utility functions. So these are functions that are quite clearly modules within their own right. So this is a useful level of abstraction. So basically we've pulled the code out. Instead of writing it several times, we've put it in just once, and we can call it as many times as we want. And even if we only call it once, if it's a clearly defined function, then it will be useful to separate it out for clarity. And also you can easily pull it out and put it in another project if you want. Next we actually have the app stage functions. So here it checks for files first, moves to the next stage, then it sets the teams. So you can see if button B was pressed, we increment the teams by 1. If button A was pressed, we decrement the teams by 1. And if nothing's pressed here, we display, so right at the beginning of the app, you see the hash and the question mark just here. And if we wait for 3000 milliseconds, you can see that it moves on to stage scoring. And stage scoring is here. Stage scoring goes through, it checks if there are files, and then if there are files, then it shows the score for the active team. And here this is the loop that sets the active team. So you can see we are going through teams XY, which was that tuple at the top, which had the XY coordinates for the LEDs, and you can see it's setting it here. It's looping through each team and setting the pixels here. If button B was pressed, then we are going to get the active team score and increment it by 1 here. and we are going to up to a maximum. First it checks it because the maximum potential display in this current app is 110 using the Abacus style light up LEDs. So here it checks it if it's under 110. Otherwise it displays a kind of error message saying limit. Button A was pressed, it will go to a minimum of 0 and decrement by 1. If the accelerometer gesture is right, here we will make the active team increment by 1. So if you're on team 1, it will go to team 2, and if you tilt it to the left, it will decrement it. And if you reach 1 and you try to decrement it further, it will go to 5, or whatever your total amount of teams are. So it will create a sort of a loop of numbers, 1 to 5 or 1 to 3, whatever you set as your maximum amount of teams at the beginning of the app. If it's shaken here, if accelerometer was gesture shake, then it skips to the reset stage here. And here you can see reset, it displays an N, and if it was and then if it was left for 3,000 milliseconds, then it goes back to the scoring stage. So you can see that if it's left on the no, we don't want to reset it, then it goes back to scoring, which is what we want. Unless you press, if you press the A or B button, then it goes to yes. So then if it's displaying, if it's reset yes, then we will run oh yeah, so here we go. We have to wait for 3,000 milliseconds, and then you will delete the files and you will reset all of the variables, and we'll go back to set teams. So that loops back round right to the beginning. And actually at the bottom of the file, you will see that there is the actual app loop. So this makes the reason why I've abstracted it out into different functions is because it makes it very easy to read. You can see exactly what's going on here. So if stage is the start, which is right at the beginning, then check files, and then you go to set teams, and then you go to scoring, and then you go to reset, which calls those functions which we've just been through. Okay, there's that bit done. So if we go to the actual GitHub site, which will actually, well, the GitHub repository that will be linked in the description, you will see here, so there is the README, which walks you through various bits of information, so like things you need. There's also possible extensions once you understand this. But if we click here under 8 commits, the history, you can see that here, this is how I've set things up. So you can see exactly that I have added app stage functions just here. So app stage functions, this is how I like to do it. So all I had in the file was these app stage functions, and I've set them up here as well. So you can see the main game loop and then these functions. We go back, and then the next thing I committed was the variables and tuples. So getting those ready and understanding what data I need to transfer to different stages and manipulate. We'll go back again. So I've done it in a chronological order. So the next thing I did was create the check files function. So here you can see checking for files, and I've had to actually add under the blank functions, I've added just a print, because otherwise it throws an error essentially in Python and emulators. And I think you get the idea now. And then there's the teams function, the scoring function, the reset function, and I actually added the possible extensions to the README last. But if you just go through the commits in chronological order, so oldest first, then you should see how the app's been created, and it should break it down for you. And also if we go to any of these, so the set teams function, you can see that there's actually quite useful comments in there. So things that are designed to remind me and help you understand what the code actually does. I believe that's it. Apart from saying that there's this fantastic emulator at https://create.withcode.uk, which actually shows you a Micropython, or it's not a Micropython, a microbit emulator, which you can just copy and paste your code into. So you could copy and paste your code into, and it would work. So if I give you an example, I could copy and paste my code here. There's one caveat actually, it errors when you try and open any files with it. So what we have to do is we comment out with any with open statements here. So print, and we have to add a print something here to stop it. Oh, that doesn't matter, so that can be anything. So we comment out any with open things, because otherwise it produces an error in the emulator. But we should be able to just copy and paste this into this emulator here, and then we press Control and Enter to run it, and you'll see that it's running. So we've selected 4 teams here, and then we can start scoring. Okay, and you can see that our nonsense messages print out here. So we'll stop that. And that's it. Thank you for listening.